Okay, here, so we have Over the Influence by Cara Alaimo. I had the privilege not too long ago in Coral Gables, basically, which is in Miami, to meet the author and listen in and participate in a discussion about the book, which is titled Over the Influence: Why Social Media is Toxic for Women and Girls and How We Can Take It Back. I previously posted the conversation on Spreaker here. Had some issues with the audio. My voice was way louder than the recorded audio, even though I thought I adjusted that. But hey, my haphazard on the road mobile podcasting is still, after all these years, I'm working out the bugs, but it's there, and eventually I will edit it and even out the audio. But the full book discussion recording is here on World Reading Club, and you can find it also on worldreadingclub.com with a photo drop from the event. This is just the introduction, and the introduction actually follows along pretty closely with what she discussed during the book, that part of the book tour that she was on. That a lot of this stuff was covered, and also there are links here in the show notes and on worldreadingclub.com where you can purchase the book or read it through your if you have Amazon Unlimited and all that. So this is the introduction once again to Over the Influence by Cara Alaimo: Why Social Media is Toxic for Women and Girls and How We Can Take it Back. Two big developments have changed the way humans live over the past 4 million years, according to Justin Garcia, PhD, head of the Kinsey Institute, which studies sex and human behavior. The first was the agricultural revolution around 12,000 years ago, when humans stopped being migratory. The second was the arrival of the internet over the past few decades. The internet, and especially social media, has had a seismic impact on everyone, not always for the better. But it's been particularly awful for women and girls, and we're only just beginning to reckon with what it's doing to us. In this book, I'll show you how social media is affecting every aspect of our lives, from how we feel about our bodies to how we parent our children and how successful we are in our careers. My name is Cara Alaimo, and I'm a communication professor at Farley Dickinson University. I'm also a social media user and a mom. I've been writing about the social impact of social media and issues women face for CNN Opinion since 2016, reacting to mounting evidence of the devastating toll social networks are taking on women and girls, and the fact that tech companies have known about these things all along. For this book, I've talked to people who identify as women and non-binary about how social media has affected their lives. They represent a wide range of ages, races, ethnicities, classes, sexual and gender identities, physical abilities, and political affiliations. Some live and work on social media. Others have deleted their profiles forever. Their stories have left me with a single conclusion: social media is toxic for women. But I believe we can and must fix these problems, and the change needs to start with the way each of us uses social media. In this book, I'll explain how women can reclaim the internet to empower ourselves by radically changing who we follow, what we post, what we like, and what we do when we see sexism and misogyny online. I'll also lay out what we need to demand from tech companies and lawmakers. Here's what we're up against. The average girl now joins social media before she turns 13. But long before then, her parents may have been sharing intimate information about her online that people can later use against her. to bully her in high school or discredit her when she grows up to become a public figure. The primary way teen girls use social media is to compare their bodies and lives to others. When they find that they don't measure up to the filtered, glamorized images posted by influencers and friends, many girls feel jealous and unhappy. Girls who use social media more are likelier to have concerns about their body images and symptoms of depression. And young girls quickly learn that one of the most effective ways to create content people will literally like is to make themselves look hot. So they sexualize themselves at shockingly young ages. As I conducted interviews with experts for this book, I was struck by how many of them ended our conversations by asking me the same question. Could I tell them how they should handle their own daughter's use of social media? So many parents who I met at playgrounds and birthday parties talk and worry about the same thing. In Chapter 1, I offer up that advice, informed by research and interviews with leading experts. In Chapter 2, I discuss how social media affects our body image. All those pictures we post on social media keep everyone's attention on our appearances. What's more, influencer culture sets near impossible standards for what our lives and bodies should look like. It's fueling a wave of body dissatisfaction and plastic surgery. It's also keeping women busy focusing on how we look instead of a whole lot of other things we might prefer to be spending our time on, like, say, dismantling the patriarchy by helping elect women to political office. In Chapter 3, I look at the way the world judges women. Thanks to social media, billions of people can now pronounce judgment In Chapter 3, I look at the way the world judges women. Thanks to social media, billions of people can now pronounce judgment on not just our bodies, but also our behavior, and they're taking the opportunity to do so. On social networks, women are coming under siege for everything from the hosiery they wear to their tone of voice when an airline screws them over at 2 a.m. As I probably don't have to tell you, men simply aren't judged by the same standards. And now, people have discovered they can make bank by secretly recording women's worst moments in public and selling the rights to companies who can help these clips go viral, so the whole world can come together to shame us. In Chapter 4, I talk about another topic of endless discussion among my friends: how to use online dating sites to find the right partner. It's now standard for single women to turn to dating apps, which ostensibly offer freedom of choice and possibility. In reality, most women are unhappy with their dating experiences. The majority of American women now say dating is harder than it was 10 years ago, according to a 2020 Pew survey. The majority of men disagree. Many heterosexual women get serious about settling down in their mid-30s while they can still have children. But since men don't live as long and tend to pair off with younger women, the number of single, straight men available to women at this life stage is shrinking. On top of that, being able to hide behind a computer screen tends to bring out men's basest behavior. Women of color have it the worst. While today no one would dream of openly disqualifying people of color when they apply for jobs or try to book Airbnbs, dating sites are the last mainstream place where people are invited to practice racism so overtly. That explains why some of the women who I interviewed for this book told me they've stopped using dating apps. The other reason? They say many of the men they're being matched with aren't real. Catfishing, pretending to be someone else, forming emotional relationships online, then hitting up victims for money, is now a major global business. And women are considered easy targets because we're perceived as emotionally vulnerable, especially when dating. But I also tell the story of a friend who applied the same degree of strategy and savvy she used in her elite global business consulting work to online dating, and is now happily married. I share her tips for protecting yourself and finding the person you're looking for online. In Chapter 5, I discuss the new forms of sexual violence and femicide that have been enabled by the internet. Online dating sites now make it easier for rapists to find victims. There are almost no statistics on how many violent crimes are tied to dating apps, which conveniently helps platforms evade responsibility for endangering women's lives. However, according to a report released by the United Kingdom's National Crime Agency, more men are becoming sex offenders because it's now so easy to find victims. And in a non-scientific survey conducted by Columbia Journalism Investigations, out of 1,200 women who dated online, a jaw-dropping 31% said they'd been sexually assaulted by someone they met on a dating app. What's more, thanks to social media, it's now possible to sexually exploit women and girls remotely, and it's happening with alarming frequency. Sextortion, blackmailing a woman to engage in sex acts, often by getting her to share a racy image, then threatening to release it publicly if she doesn't do more, is just one example. One 13-year-old girl was sextorted by a 30-year-old man in Israel while her mother was in the same room. I also discussed the non-consensual sharing of nude images. While this is often called revenge porn, Kamala Harris points out in her autobiography that it's not the right term. Revenge often isn't accurate because the women haven't done anything wrong, and the images frequently weren't ever intended to be porn. For women who, unlike men, are frequently shamed rather than celebrated for our sexuality, this is often life-destroying. Former California Congresswoman Kate Hill resigned from Congress when her nude images were released online, while so many men who have been accused of sexual abuse, including the then President Donald Trump, have remained in office. I also look at how on social media, when like-minded sociopaths, like men's rights activists, get together, their beliefs become even more extreme. Now, the men who have been radicalized in online communities for misogynists are going out and committing real-world violence. For example, since 2014, there have been numerous acts of mass violence against women committed by involuntary celibate men who believe they've been wrongly deprived of sex with beautiful women. And now, so-called incel ideology has permeated youth culture on TikTok, where jokes about violently abusing women are commonplace and considered hilarious. In Chapter 6, I take on the world of influencers. If you watch or read the news, you'll see regular stories about the rare people who make millions of dollars from their social media content. But the truth is that most of the people who try to work as online content creators, the people popularly called influencers, are women who never earn a living wage for their labor. One scholar now calls them digital housewives. Meanwhile, when women in other professions try to use social media to bolster their careers, they often end up with fewer followers, reposts, and speaking opportunities than their male counterparts. In the next two chapters, I look at how misinformation is directly targeted to us because of our gender. In Chapter 7, I explain how when women become mothers, they routinely turn to the internet for information and support. What they often find instead is misleading information or misinformation that encourages them to make dangerous, potentially deadly decisions. While experts have been sounding alarms about the impact of fake news on elections, they've mostly ignored what I call misinformation from mommies. On social media, people with no medical training declare themselves to be experts and urge women to go into childbirth, a process that poses significant risks of deadly complications without the benefits of modern medicine. Women are made to feel guilty for using safe pain medication during labor, while no one advocates withholding pain management from men who undergo excruciating medical procedures. And sanctum mommy culture makes mothers feel like failures if the realities of their lives don't match up to Instagram images of other people's children smiling beautifully in starched white dresses while eating their homemade organic snacks. Beneath these veneers, Instamoms are every bit as vulnerable as the women they may inadvertently shame, of course, as they look online for validation in a culture that makes it near impossible for women to balance their careers, children, and sanity, and contend with the reality that, if they want to make money from sponsors, their posts must be cheerful. In Chapter 8, I discuss how anti-vaxxers convince women that safe, life-saving vaccines are dangerous. One way they've built their movement online is by reaching out to women when they're most vulnerable, after their child has died or received a devastating medical diagnosis, and convincing them vaccines were responsible, turning them into fierce anti-vax advocates. This has been going on for years, and it laid the groundwork for people to be skeptical of coronavirus vaccines. Anti-vaxxers successfully convinced many women not to get vaccinated against COVID by using social media to spread a deceptive claim uniquely designed to frighten us: the contention that the vaccine causes infertility. Then, when they or their family members got sick or schools were shuttered due to community spread, women were largely the ones left to handle the fallout. In Chapter 9, I discussed the new ways women are trolled online and what we can do about it. A 2020 study conducted by the Economist Intelligence Unit found that 38% of a sample of women in 51 countries have been victims of online violence, from violent threats to stalking to doxing, posting private information like someone's address online. Women of color are hardest hit. Amnesty International found that black women are 84% more likely than white women to be on the receiving end of online abuse. So when people like Elon Musk claim to be promoting free speech when they host abusive content on their platforms, what they're really doing is silencing the women and girls who flee social media when they're targeted. One reason online abuse against women isn't taken more seriously is because tech companies and law enforcement agencies are, of course, largely run by men. Women routinely say that when they file reports of abuse after men threaten to attack them online, tech companies either don't respond or claim their terms of service weren't violated. When women report online death threats to police officers, or when women report online death threats to police, officers often don't investigate. By contrast, people who make death threats against police officers online are often promptly identified and prosecuted. In Chapter 10, I look at the shocking sexism and misogyny that women who work in Silicon Valley and as social media managers for brands are up against. The cultures inside tech companies have been described as brotopia, but they're far from utopia for the women who come up against rape jokes and sexual passes from their bosses as a normal part of trying to do their jobs. Meanwhile, most of the people who run the social media accounts of companies and other organizations are women. The average salary for a social media manager is roughly a third of the average salary in the male-dominated tech sector, even though many of the skills social media managers draw upon are remarkably similar to those in tech jobs. I also discuss how, by reading our emails, tracking our physical locations via our phones, and following our every online move, modern tech companies have created what Al Gore calls a stalker economy. Finally, in Chapter 11, I explore the predominant way feminism and female empowerment have been portrayed online in recent years, through viral videos made by companies telling women we can solve all our problems or all our own problems if we just feel beautiful, act confident, and buy the right body wash, Instead of looking to others, like say the corporations who put out these videos while continuing to objectify and underpay women, to change the way they treat us. All this has triggered an epic backlash that has reduced the rights of millions of women and girls. We can see this in everything from the election of Donald Trump in 2016 to the 2022 Supreme Court decision that took away women's right to decide whether and when we become mothers and terminate pregnancies that threaten our lives. While writing this book, I came to a shocking realization. Life now seems to be imitating social media. We all know social media has become a cesspool of sexism and misogyny, but we can't escape it by turning off our phones or deleting our accounts, because what's happening on social media is changing our offline world. It's making it more socially acceptable and commonplace to abuse women and deprive us of our rights. An example of this is how incels who have been radicalized online have gone on to commit so many mass shootings. And violence targeting women in politics is on the rise all over the world, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. It's hard not to trace this back to the shocking abuse women politicians are facing online, which I describe in Chapter 9. It can also help explain why, in 2021, women were less likely to say they'd consider running for office than they were in 2001. Some people say we should stop using social networks because they're toxic places, but I don't believe we should turn social media into what Saudi Arabia was like when I visited a decade ago, where women are run out of public places in which we could empower ourselves. It's also increasingly clear to me that this solution wouldn't work anyway, because as men become more radicalized online, they're becoming more emboldened to abuse and even kill women offline. We can't stand down and let this keep happening. We have to fix what's wrong with social media. This book is motivated by my fears about how using social media and living in the world wrought by social media will affect my own young daughters. It's a rallying cry for us to use our collective power to upend this entire system. I'll explain exactly how we can do it by recognizing and calling out the subtle and not so subtle sexism and misogyny we find online. Rejecting the misinformation that is directly targeted to us because of our gender, using our platforms to boost one another and call attention to the injustices we collectively face, and demanding that tech companies and lawmakers crack down on the astounding new forms of violence and abuse we're up against online. Let's do this. All right. So that was the intro to Over the Influence by Cara Alaimo, Why Social Media is Toxic for Women and Girls and How We Can Take It Back. Again, the live recording of her book discussion is also on worldreadingclub.com, where I published it last week. I met Cara Alaimo in the end of April. I think it was April 29th in Coral Gables in Miami, where she was there doing a discussion of it. And I had the opportunity not only to listen into the discussion, but to participate and ask some questions and get some feedback. So that is how I even found out about this book in the first place. I didn't even know that it existed until I was at the Books and Books in Coral Gables and saw that they were having an event. And then her and her host, her moderator, were gracious enough to let me record the audio for the previous podcast that was published on May 7th, 2024. It's about an hour long, and you can hear pretty much her discussion and her takes on the same things that you heard in that intro there that I just read. Yeah, and it was actually on April 29th of 2024 when I met her at Books and Books in Coral Gables, aka Miami, which is not too far down the street from University of Miami. So you can go ahead and check that out. The links to that will be on the show notes for this, and also you can find it on worldreadingclub.com.